Welcome to the Resurrection and Waiting podcast with Pastor Eddie Briery. We're having raw, real, and transparent conversations about how God meets us in the dead places of our lives. Click subscribe to follow us on the journey, and we hope you find life in this episode of the Resurrection and Waiting podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this special edition of the Resurrection and Waiting podcast. My name is Eddie Briery, and it is an incredible honor to have you with us today. Today, you'll hear from a good friend, Miss Cassie Hammett, and an interview with an incredible lady and all that God has done in her life. May 3rd, all across Northwest Louisiana, is what we call the Give for Good Day. Every dollar is matched by the Community Foundation, which means the dollars that you give to support incredible ministries like the Hub will go further than ever before. The Hub is asking people to give for the good of rescue. It's one of the 4 R's that the Hub represents. The Hub is in the fight against sex trafficking, not only in our community, but in literally every part of rescuing across the nation. And you have an opportunity to be a part of that. Today, we are celebrating all that God has done and all that God is doing in the lives of women and children that are trapped in a life of sexual exploitation. At the end of this podcast, you'll hear Cassie give some information on how you can give to the Hub on this Give for Good Monday. We look forward to partnering with you, and we'll include all of the links needed in the description of this podcast so that you can give those dollars to be matched again by the Community Foundation so that we can be a blessing to this ministry and help more women in more ways than ever before. So sit back, relax, get your tissues ready, press in and ask God to speak to you through this incredible interview, and we hope that you are blessed.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Cassie Hammett, and I am the founder of the Hub Urban Ministries. It is a ministry in Shreveport, Louisiana. That's where it was started. Now has locations all across the country, which I'm super pumped about, just watching God work all over the country through the models of the Hub. And I have a special friend with me today, Janae. Do you want to say anything, Janae?
Hello.
Hey, girl. So Janae and I are going to be talking in a second, and Janae is taking a very brave step today and sharing her story. And we're just going to be talking through just some major points of her story that we want you to hear today. And I'm super proud of you, Janae, for doing this. Super proud, because I know that your story is valuable. And it's not something that we want to give away flippantly. So I do want you to hear me say I'm super proud of you. Just a little background, though. So if you're listening and maybe you've never heard about the Hub or you don't know a whole lot about what we do, I just want to give you a little background for our ministry. So the Hub, our mission statement is that the Hub is on a mission to give everyone in our city access to a restored life. And we kind of explain restored life and using 4 R's. And those 4 R's are rescue, relationship, resources, and recovery. And that's kind of the way we frame what does it look like for a life to be restored. We believe that those 4 R's need to be intact in a person's life. And specifically today, we're talking about that first R, the rescue R. And so because that's our mission statement, that we're on a mission to give everyone in our city access to a restored life, how do we do that, right? So we do that through 2 main ministries here in Shreveport, Louisiana. One is the Lovewell Center in downtown Shreveport, where we serve the homeless and those experiencing poverty. And the other ministry that we sort of execute our mission through is called Purchased, Not for Sale. And Purchased is a ministry designed to bring access to rescue, relationships, resources, and recovery to specifically women who have been in the sex industry, have experienced sexual exploitation, or who have also been victims of sex trafficking, as well as working with high-risk children and children who have been trafficked. And so today, we're going to be talking primarily along the lines of Purchased and the work that's happening in our city to not just end human trafficking, because I think that when you say end human trafficking, it makes it about the cause. But this is about the lives. This is about lives like Janae. This is, when we say rescue, we think of a person. We think of Janae. We think of the individuals in our city that are desperate for a way out of sexual exploitation. And so just a warning, though, this topic is heavy. And you may not have ever heard some of the things that you're about to hear. And my hope is maybe you haven't, and that this can be transformative in the way that you think about human trafficking and the way that you think about poverty and addiction and all of those things. And so we're going to jump into an interview with my friend. And I first want to give my perspective of Janae. So Janae's been in our program for almost a year. She has graduated the Purchase program, which is unbelievable. Yeah. I know. And if you know anything about recovery, you know that graduating a recovery program is incredibly difficult. And so, man, like, you are the hero, right? Like,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So proud. Janae came into our program, again, has completed that program, and then became our very first employee for the Hub's brand new social enterprise called Rise Up and Roast. It's a coffee distribution company that we're running, and Janae was our very first employee, which is so amazing, and it's just the coolest story ever. For me, Janae, I love you for so many reasons. But I think you are hilarious.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think you have a very understated humor, but you are quietly strong. I can see in your life that you survived because you were strong, right? That like,
yes,
yeah, you were able to walk through some things, and I see that strength in you every day. You're also a team player. Like, whatever needs to be done, that's what we're gonna do, and you're willing to do the job. You're willing to jump in and help and serve. And man, I really love you. I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love you too.
Yeah. And so Janae and I talked a little bit about how do you even start a conversation about her story, and kind of sharing from her perspective about this idea of being rescued from human trafficking. All right, so Janae, we are going to jump into your story when you were an adult. So we don't have a ton of time. We don't have enough time to talk about like birth all the way through, right? Mm-hmm. Because we understand all of us have stories that begin from the moment that we're born. But for today's purposes, we're going to kind of start in the middle of your story. Because today what we're wanting to do through your story is help people understand when you hear rescue, or when you hear victim of trafficking, or when you even hear the word prostitution, what is it really like? What is it really? The goal of today's interview is, one, to elevate your story, because your story is incredible and we want you to have a voice. But another goal is just to help people understand, like, hey, this isn't just a statistic or a number or a cause. Like, this is actual lives being lived by actual people. And so we're going to start at sort of midway through your story. Okay. And you shared with me that you had been walking through, at this point of your life, multiple years of a drug addiction, and had moved into a recovery program. You moved out of that recovery program, and what happened? What started the domino effect that led you to being sitting here in front of me today?
I was placed in an area where it wasn't good for my recovery, and it started from there. I started getting high again. In the process, I moved to Providence House, where I lost my kids because of my drug use. And it's just been a downward spiral since.
Yeah. So when you moved out of that rehab, that recovery program, what about the environment you were in wasn't good for your recovery?
It was a place where drugs were being used, drugs was being sold.
Yeah, so you were just immediately back sort of in that environment that you had come out of. And so you went through recovery, but now here you found yourself just back in the same spot, and maybe didn't feel equipped, to walk through that so freshly out of recovery. Do you feel like that's pretty accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you do. So in that season of your life, you started a relationship,
yes.
Right? And that relationship, when you look at sort of the story, right, that landed you here, that relationship you kind of shared with me was sort of the first entry point for you into prostitution.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it was my kid's dad. We had been together 5 years, and he was into drugs too. I moved to Shreveport, and he moved to Shreveport, and it's just a downward spiral from there. We're just chasing a high. He would make me get in cars and sell myself, take the money, beat me up, be with other women.
Yeah. But this was someone you knew really well.
Yes.
Yeah, and this was someone that you cared about. Is
Yes.
that correct? Would you say that? Yeah, like you had a relationship. It wasn't a stranger.
No.
No, it wasn't. And what about that made that harder for you?
It hurt. It made me stay out there longer, and it made me not want my kids.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to put them back in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're a good mom.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you say made you kind of stay out there longer, is partially because you did have a relationship with him? And
yes.
Yeah, so there was trust built, and there was love and care. And did that make it kind of harder to get away or to leave?
Yes.
Yeah. So you did eventually end that relationship? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then what happened after that?
I still was using, still prostituting. I met another guy, and I sold myself to him. And after that night, it was just the same cycle going over and over of selling myself, but this one was abusive. Well, the other one was abusive, but this one, the abuse started from the beginning.
Yeah, right. So in the other relationship, you can see now that it was abusive, but
Yes.
it wasn't as clear to you at the time. But that second relationship started that way.
Yes.
And now that you know what you know about what you walked through in that second relationship, would you say that you had a choice in the matter of whether or not to sell yourself?
No.
No. What did that feel like?
Horrible. Like I had someone was telling me when to sleep, when to eat, when to do this, when to do that. It was always what he wanted to do, not what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that sounds a lot like control, right? Like just if someone's telling you when to eat and when to sleep, I mean, that's a very controlling environment. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And I think what people often don't understand about individuals who find themselves in situations like that, a lot of times people will say, well, she's an adult, she should have just left, right? Or
it's not that easy.
You're right, it's not that easy.
It's a way to survive. You don't know anything else or know anyone else. And I just came to Shreveport just to get recovery.
Yeah. You were in a new environment.
Yes.
And I think that what people don't factor in is that when you're being controlled by someone, you can't just walk away sometimes.
No. I would leave, he would find me and beat me.
Yeah.
He would threaten me.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just pausing there and just everyone just kind of thinking about like, man, like, do I have a perception about that situation that may be wrong? Because I think a lot of times it's easier for our brain to say, oh, well, they're an adult, so they can just make a better decision, walk away. And if she didn't make that decision, then that's sort of, the consequences of that. But in your story, you didn't have the choice.
No.
And I think, one, I want to say I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you found yourself in a situation. Knowing you now, knowing how strong you are and how hilarious you are and how full of life you are, it's, as your friend, it's hard for me to hear that your life landed there. So, man, it's just one of those moments I just want to pause and just kind of speak to, hey, like choice is a privilege. And when you're in a situation like you were in, that wasn't a privilege you were being given to choose any different. And so from there, help people understand how you went from that to sitting in front of me right now, because that's kind of a wild story, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you were with this dude, and we just heard, full control, being sold against your will, being abused. So what happened?
Well, my birthday of last year, May 29th, we got into an argument, and he threw a beer bottle at my head and busted my head wide open.
Now, you told me that first one, though, you ducked.
Yes, I ducked the
missed you.
first one.
Yeah.
I missed the first one,
Yeah,
but the
that's
second
right.
one hit me in the top of my head, not top of my head, my forehead. I don't have a big scar. It's a little scar now. Um, I when it happened, I was like, it's just a little cut. It's okay,
Mhm.
but my head kept bleeding and bleeding
Yeah.
and bleeding and bleeding. So eventually, I called 911. Someone's like, you gotta go to the hospital. So I called 911, and I ended up in the hospital. And the doctor who was working on me said you were going to St. Mary's, and I didn't ask no questions. I was just tired,
Yeah.
and I couldn't go anymore.
Yeah.
And I was just glad to have somewhere safe to be
That's
for
right.
the night. And then I went to rehab. And before I went to rehab, some ladies from Purchase came and talked to me and asked me would I like to be in that program. And I went to rehab for 30 days and then came back. And I was in Purchase.
Yeah. So amen. I'm so thankful. So thankful you're here. Let's back up a little bit. So, just so everyone listening understands, when Janae went into the hospital, which I think, one thing that I'm always so aware of is God's specific attention to our lives, right? And how he pays attention to details, and there's not coincidences when it comes to God moving, right? Would you agree that he pays attention?
Yes, he does.
And that hospital that you went to, right, in our community is a hospital that Purchase has a very close relationship with and does a lot of training and teaching people how to recognize the very things that you were experiencing. And so when we have this conversation about rescue, for people listening, when it comes to specifically human trafficking, what it takes to create rescue for someone, right, to create the pathway out, isn't just one nonprofit. It's not just the hub. It requires every system in a community coming together, being trained and aware, and working with each other to identify victims of trafficking and then working together to move on their behalf. Does that make sense? And that's what you experienced.
Yes.
And so I just want to speak to this idea of rescue is that it is not a simple process on either side. And we're going to talk about your story, but from the system side, right? From this side of things, it's not an easy process, and it requires a lot of people taking a lot of care to build awareness and to build responses so that when a life as valuable as yours comes into an ER, there's a recognition of what's going on. There's a phone call that's made. There is a plan, right, that's moved into action. And so in your life, that wasn't coincidental for you to land where you landed. And you probably know that now.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, right? Of all the hospitals that you went to, right? We can look at that and just be so thankful that God was moving. Because the truth is, it's not about the hub. It's not about me. It's God moving on behalf of our lives and positioning all of this stuff that allows for us to take those steps to freedom. So when you hear me say that the rescue process isn't simple, do you agree with that?
Yes, because I also I had an emergency. I had to go back to the emergency room for another incident, and I got to thank the doctor.
That's right.
Who
You did.
who called you guys.
That's right.
Yes.
You got to thank him in person.
Yes.
So when you realized, okay, so they transfer you, you're in a room, and these random women you've never met come into your room.
Yes,
right?
I was like, "What's going on?" Because I was in the maternity ward of it,
And you're
I'm
like, "I'm not Yeah. So what she's speaking to is the partnership that we have at this hospital moves victims of trafficking to the safest place inside of their building. And that happens to be in the maternity ward. And so that's hilarious. She said, "Look, I'm in the wrong place. I am not pregnant." What did it feel like to have strangers, essentially, come into your room talking to you? Help us understand, from your perspective. You said you were tired, obviously.
Yes,
You're in a lot of pain. Worn down. What did that feel like?
underweight. It felt like something lifted off of my shoulders, like angels was coming to rescue me.
Mm. Yeah. Do you remember feeling like, did you immediately trust them?
I had tried everything else, trusted everybody else. It didn't.
You're like, I mean,
hurt.
I didn't really have the opportunity to.
No.
Yeah. So you get into a conversation with who you know now was who?
Holly.
Hallie. Yeah,
Hey,
that's right. And now you're friends, right? So
Yes.
it's just amazing to think a year later that these are people that you're living life with now. So as they started to tell you about the opportunity, right? Like, hey, we recognize the situation that you're in and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to leave. You said that felt like relief, but what else did it feel like?
A part of me still wanted to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
It was very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard. I battled with it because I went and smoked a cigarette. And I'm like, okay, I can go run for it. I can go back.
Yeah.
But
This is my chance. I can get away.
Yes,
Yeah.
like I'm right here by the place where I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'm tired. I can't go anymore.
Yeah.
Like I'm either going to be dead or half dead
Yeah.
if I don't get myself together.
So I think that something that's super important about what you just said is that I think often we think, okay, someone's given rescue, someone's given the chance to get out of anything, not just sex trafficking, but anything. And if we hear that someone hesitates or someone isn't quite sure, or someone wants to go back into what they just came out of, oftentimes, like, people can get a little judgmental, right? Of that moment that says, like, well, of course, if you offer someone rescue, they should be so excited and so thankful and so ready. But that's not the case.
No.
Normally, it's not the case. Can you
No.
help us understand why?
Because we're used to the environment, the controlling, like it's came a part of lifestyle, just like any other lifestyle, and that's what I was used to, and that's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's what you know.
Yeah,
That's right. I heard a phrase one time, I would move out of hell, but I know all the street names, right? Like,
yes,
it's what I know. And because it's what I know, anything different doesn't feel exciting,
No.
right? Like, what does it feel like? Does it feel exciting or what does it feel like to look at, I'm going to make a decision to walk into unknown territory? What did that feel like to you?
scary.
It is very scary.
Because I went on to rehab, and even in rehab, like I was ready to leave.
Yeah.
Like the lifestyle was like it had taken over me.
Yeah. And I want people to recognize, you've said 3 or 4 times, I wanted to leave and I could have left, but you didn't.
No.
And I think, man, like, that speaks to your strength, and that speaks to you in that moment.
Yes, ma'am.
As broken as you might have felt and as tired and worn down as you might have felt, a lot of people do bolt. A lot of people do run, and a lot of people don't stick out that decision, but you did. And I want to honor you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I don't know that I would, right? I mean, like, if we all stop for a second and put ourselves in the situation you were in, only knowing sort of one way of existing, having these relationships that were abusive, yes, but manipulative. So you really had a lot of affection and loyalty and all of those things going on, being at the end of your rope, and then strangers walking into your room and saying, hey, like literally saying, like, you want to come live in our house? Right? Like,
Yes.
that's crazy. And I think that's what people don't understand
No.
about rescue, is how much it requires on you, how much trust it requires, blind trust, because you didn't know us, right?
Mm-mm.
How much strength, how much grit, to be honest with you, it requires for you to look at a group of people you've never met and agree to walk into sobriety, which for an addict is wild to do.
Yes.
To walk into unknown territory with people you've never met who are offering you amazing things, but offering you, hey, come live in this house and come essentially give your life up for a year. And you did it.
Yes.
And I just want to, man, like, if I had a confetti popper, I would pop it right now. I forgot to bring one, but that is astounding to me. And I want you to hear me saying that. And I think that I, on a daily basis, come away from hanging out with you and hanging out around the Purchase program in a lot of ways challenged by you, because you're sticking out far more discomfort in a day than most people are. And it just is this constant reminder to me to, man, like, stay committed to the process, right? Like, God is restoring me and delivering me. And sometimes I just want to cut and run. But I look at your life and I say, I don't have to, though, because your life is an example. And I just wanted to thank you for that. So she's in the hospital. She decides, I'm going to give these crazy people a chance. She goes into rehab to get sort of a stable beginning, detox off of some things. And you move into the Purchased house. So what was that moment like, walking into the house for the first time?
Oh, man. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
I started crying. I never had been in a home so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I loved it. I fell in love with it.
Yeah. So it was different. Was it a different environment for you?
Yes.
Yes. What was different about it?
Let's see. I got my own room.
Mm-hmm.
It was clean. It was comfortable. It was
Quiet.
peaceful, quiet.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's brand new for you at this point, right?
Yes.
I mean, is that something that you had ever experienced?
No.
No, not that you can remember.
No.
Right. So just a little backstory is that Purchase has a program that Janae has participated in, and a big part of that program is that there's a residential piece. So it's a live-in program. So when we say the Purchased house, what that means is Janae lived with other women in recovery, and she for a year came every day to our facility and went to classes and counseling. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But again, everyone think about this. This is a massive decision that she made, and she walks into this house for the first time. And I'm just so thankful to hear of how the environment spoke to you. And I think it's important for us to hear that, because, man, like, the beauty of that house really just reflects what God thinks about you, honestly, and what he sees when he sees you. And it's just really cool for me to hear what that was like. And so you started the program.
Mm-hmm.
And the program includes classes and counseling and all sorts of stuff for lots of hours every single week. Talk a little bit about, in all honesty, what was it like to be in the program?
I had my challenging days,
Mm-hmm.
but overall, it treated me well. I learned a lot about myself. It gave me self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me my smile back.
Yes.
I love to look in the mirror today.
Yeah, that's amazing. And were the classes easy?
No.
No. Not
No.
at all, right?
No.
Yeah. Were they heavy for you sometimes?
Yes, at times some of them were.
Yeah.
Especially talking about my childhood and things.
Right.
Just had to pull all of that out of me.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. The best version of of recovery isn't one that focuses just on a drug use or just on prostitution, but looks at the roots, right? And I'm not a gardener. I've never kept a single thing alive besides my children and now a puppy. But I know that the difference between cutting a plant off at the ground and pulling it up by the root, that's two very different things, right? Mm-hmm. Pulling something up from the root takes a little more, you got to put your back into it sometimes, and there's a ripping that happens. Would you say that feels like what recovery felt like sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah, just ripping stuff out.
Yes.
And I think we can all learn something from that, to be honest with you. Like, if we have things if all of us who are listening, if we have things in our own life that we just can't seem to shake, right? Like unhealthy behaviors or maybe unhealthy relationships or whatever it might be, like we may need to stop and say, like, am I just chopping this off at the ground, or am I dealing with the root? Because if you don't deal with the root, what happens? It comes back, right? And so I think what's important when you talk about rescue from human trafficking, for people listening, it's not enough just to provide the way out. Would you agree with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because without recovery, without wraparound community, without people, and I'll use the 4 R's of the hub. We got rescue, but without relationships and resources and recovery, not much has changed outside of maybe you've removed someone from that unhealthy environment. But just like you experienced, you went to rehab, but because your environment did not change, you found yourself right back in the same situation. So I think what I'm trying to point out is that rescue is more than just removal from that situation, that we got to look at the whole story. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that it's a much bigger conversation. It's a much wider story. And really, like, man, I hope people are hearing this, but like, you're the hero here, right? Like, because nobody forced you to do this program, correct?
No, ma'am.
If they did, I'm going to beat them up. You tell me now.
No, ma'am.
Nobody forced you to do it.
No.
So for every day for over 9 months, every single day, you woke up, you stayed.
Yes.
You woke up and you decided to come every single day, rip stuff up in your life and let God heal you, let people come around you. You made that decision every single day for 9 months. You understand that's astounding because you didn't have to. And most of us listening won't work on our own lives 5 minutes a day, much less almost 40 hours a week, which is what you've been doing. So
yes.
It's just incredible. So we're going to kind of fast forward a little bit, but when Janae graduated, she became the first employee of Rise Up and Rose. Shout out our coffee. You can't buy it yet. You can buy it this summer. We'll let you know. But it's the best. Is it the best coffee?
Yes.
It is the best coffee.
Yes, it is.
So to kind of end, you got to take rescue all the way through, right? You got to start at the beginning, and this is more for people walking with individuals that are being rescued out of anything, that you have to think about the whole story. And for your life, one big part of your story is re-entry back into the community, right? Like, you can't live with us forever, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
I know. We're going to have Grandma Janae one day just rocking on the porch. And so Rise Up and Roast is designed to begin to rebuild your skill set to put you on a track to finding employment in the community. And we started Rise Up and Roast together, me and you and Iman. I mean, that was it. Like,
yes.
Just you, single employee. Again, the hero. And you're currently an employee of Rise Up and Roast.
Yes.
So what does it feel like to have employment again?
It feels great.
Yeah? Is it hard?
It's hard.
It is hard.
It is hard. I haven't worked in so many years, and it just feels good to get it going again.
Yeah. And would you say the way you think about work is different than it used to be?
Yes.
Yeah? In what ways?
Because I'm sober.
Yes.
My jobs in the past, I wasn't sober.
That's right. So you are clear-minded.
Yes.
Showing up every day, putting your hands to grinding coffee and pouring it in bags and It's a crazy thing that we have going on in there, but you are showing up and I watch you do it every day. You show up and you really are putting your hands to creating something.
Yes.
And I think maybe not specifically for you, but in general, when you talk about lives that have come out of the sex industry in general, the idea of work is very warped in their minds because work is attached to their body,
Yes.
right? Attached to when I say work, I think I have to go sell myself, right? Like a lot of times that's sort of maybe the only definition of work that comes to mind. And
Yes,
so,
because I had a little side job, and before I would go to work, I would have to prostitute.
right.
Then after I come home from my side job, prostituting,
Yeah.
even prostituting on the job.
That's right. So what I think is important for people to understand when you're walking with someone through the process of rescue and recovery, that a lot of what needs to happen is a redefining of things, right? Like helping individuals understand that, hey, this may be what you thought of work, but here's a new way of thinking. And I'm watching that happen for you, right? Like this new way of thinking about work, because the reality is like you were created to work, right? Like not to have a job specifically, but you were created to tend to things, right? God created you
Yes.
with a purpose, and you're a really hard worker. And I think that it's been incredible watching God breathe sort of that value back into you. Does employment make you feel valued as an individual?
Yes.
It does, right? Because you're a part of something.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a part of something, and now you're working on a team, and that team loves you and is cheering you on, and you're using. Did you like deem yourself the secretary? Was that a decision you made? Like Janae came in last week to our workplace and said, secretary. They started calling her Secretary Janae. So I guess you gave yourself that title.
Yeah, that's a future job I want. I would love to be a secretary.
Yeah,
And greet
so
people and
you're
smile.
Just doing it now. You're the
Yes.
secretary of Rise Up and Roast. And it's just been really cool. I just wanted you to hear me say this. It's been really cool to see you take ownership of that.
Thank
and
you.
to find the thing that you're good at, because you are really good at the things you're doing at Rise Up and Roast, counting and all of those things, making sure we have everything we're supposed to have. And when we deliver the coffee, you're so friendly and just open and warm and inviting. And I think you're operating in your gifts. And as we close, like my hope about telling your story is that, one, you become a celebrity to us, because you are to me. Like,
yeah, thank you.
I don't care about all these, big Christian celebrities, man. Like I'm sitting across from someone who has done far greater things. And I think that although your life may not be on a platform for thousands of people, it's on a platform for me every day.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope that more than anything that people walk away putting a person to sex trafficking, listening and going, oh, it's just not that cut and dry, right? It's just not, you don't want to do it, so stop doing it. It's not easy. And when it comes to rescue, just understanding that God is a rescuing God. That's his nature. And the way that he does that, though, is through us. And if we don't show up, your story doesn't happen, right? That it actually does. I think people sometimes are a little like about saying it requires us. I know that God could do anything he wants to do without us. I understand that. But that's not what he chooses, right? Like that's not what he does. He moves in us, sinful,
Yes.
fleshful, full of flesh people, to accomplish rescue. And so if we aren't obedient, your life may be different. And I think it's important for people to understand that. Like,
yes.
yeah, like we have to fight for each other, and I believe that you're walking into a future where you're going to start fighting for people, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel that way?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Yeah. I think we've talked a little bit, maybe it wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but about how you want to speak into younger.
Yes, I want
lives.
to prevent another young lady from going through what I had to go through.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think that speaks to, that's what God does. He rescues us from things, just like in my own life, and restores us, and then says, hey, now you get to come be a part of what I'm doing on the earth, which is restoring other lives. And you're going to be unstoppable out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm super thankful. And I'm thankful to you for opening up today and for teaching us. And so if you're listening, my hope is that you come away from this conversation feeling the heaviness of sex trafficking, because now there's a person behind it. A really cute, funny person, right? Like
Thank you.
a real person who has a life and gifts and who laughs and cries and feels pain and all of those things. And we also hope that you come away understanding a little bit more about what purchase does, and the links that it takes to provide the way out so that people can choose freedom. And so if you want to know more about the Hub, you can go to thehubministry.com. Everything you need to know about both the Lovewell and purchase is on that website. You can get involved through volunteering. If you aren't local, you can get involved through giving. There's 100 different ways that you can jump in and be a part. And the last thing I'll say is that no matter how you jump in, whether that's giving $5 or coming and serving or whatever it is, you become a part of something like what you just heard. So every volunteer, every dollar given to the Hub doesn't just go to some blank kind of organization, right? That it's going to you. It's going to a life. It's going to rescuing individuals and giving them access to what you just heard today. And so if you want to get involved with the Hub, we would love to have you. So just go to our website, thehubministry.com. You can also go to our socials, just at the Hub Ministry, and learn everything you need to know. Shoot us an email if you have questions. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you, Janae.
You're welcome.
You have anything else you want to say?
Thank you for having me. No.
Nope, you're good?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you for listening.